The winter sun was already setting as Keanu Reeves finished his final scene for the day. The film crew had been shooting in a remote area outside Montreal for the past 3 weeks, battling the harsh Canadian winter to capture the perfect shots for his upcoming movie. Keanu pulled his thick jacket tighter around himself as he thanked the crew members and headed toward his car. Despite the bone-chilling cold, he always made time to show his appreciation to everyone on set, from the director to the people bringing coffee. That was just who he was. The temperature had dropped even further by the time Keanu started his drive back to the hotel. The heater in his rental car worked overtime as snowflakes began to fall outside, dancing in the beams of his headlights. The road stretched empty before him, winding through dense pine forests covered in white. He wasn't in a rush. Keanu often enjoyed these quiet drives after a long day of filming, a rare moment of peace in his busy schedule. About 15 minutes into the drive, something caught his eye. A small movement along the roadside that seemed out of place, against the stillness of the snowy landscape. Keanu slowed the car, peering through the passenger window. There it was again, a slight shifting in the snowbank. He pulled over carefully, leaving the headlights on to illuminate the area. "Hello?" he called out as he stepped from the car, the cold air immediately biting at his face. No response came except the whisper of wind through the trees. Keanu walked, closer to where he'd seen the movement, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. That's when he saw it. A small shape, trembling violently, partially buried in the snow. A dog. It was curled into a tight ball, its fur matted with ice, looking so small and vulnerable against the vast whiteness surrounding it. "Hey there, buddy," Keanu said softly, crouching down several feet away. He didn't want to frighten the animal. The dog lifted its head slightly, revealing dark eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. It was a medium-sized dog with light brown fur, though it was hard to tell much more with all the snow and ice covering it. The dog attempted to stand but couldn't seem to find the strength. It let out a pitiful whimper that cut straight to Keanu's heart. Without hesitation, he returned to his car and popped the trunk, retrieving the emergency blanket he always kept there. His mind was already racing ahead. The nearest town was at least 30 minutes away. Would there be a vet open this late? The dog clearly needed help fast. Moving slowly, Keanu approached the dog again, speaking in low, gentle tones. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Let's get you warmed up." The dog watched him warily but didn't try to run or growl, probably too weak to do either. Years of working with animal trainers on movie sets had taught Keanu how to approach frightened animals. He kept his movement slow and predictable as he extended his hand, letting the dog sniff his knuckles. "That's it, good dog," he murmured. The animal's nose was dry and cold, not a good sign. After a moment, Keanu carefully reached out and stroked the dog's head. The poor thing leaned slightly into his touch, as if starved for warmth and kindness. Encouraged, Keanu unfolded the blanket with one hand while continuing to pet the dog with the other. "Let's get this around you, okay? You must be freezing out here." The wind picked up, sending a fresh swirl of snowflakes around them. Night was falling fast and the temperature would only drop further. There was no time to waste. As gently as he could, Keanu slipped the blanket around the dog's body, speaking soothingly the entire time. The animal tensed briefly, but then seemed to realize the blanket offered blessed warmth. "I'm going to pick you up now," Keanu explained, as if the dog could understand every word. "We need to get you somewhere warm." He slid his arms beneath the blanket-wrapped dog and lifted. The animal was lighter than he expected, worryingly so. As Keanu raised the dog from its snowy bed, something caught his eye. There was an odd shape in the depression where the dog had been lying. Shifting the dog carefully to one arm, Keanu brushed away some of the snow with his free hand. His fingers touched something solid, not a rock or tree branch, but something with corners. A box? What on earth would a box be doing out here in the middle of nowhere beneath a freezing dog? The dog whimpered again, bringing Keanu's attention back to the urgent matter at hand. "Hang on, buddy. Let's get you taken care of first." Carried the dog to his car, opening the passenger door awkwardly with his elbow. Once the dog was settled on the seat, Keanu cranked the heat up even higher and grabbed his phone to search for the nearest veterinary clinic. The dog's eyes followed his movements, still wary, but perhaps with a glimmer of hope now. "There's a 24-hour emergency vet about 40 minutes from here," Keanu told his new companion, reaching over to tuck the blanket more securely around the shivering animal. "Hang in there, okay?" But something about that box nagged at him. Why would it be there in the middle of nowhere, and why had the dog been lying on top of it? Was it just coincidence or something more? "Give me 1 second, Keanu said, patting the dog gently. He hurried back to the spot where he'd found the animal, this time using the flashlight on his phone to see better in the growing darkness. The box was still there, half buried in snow. It wasn't very large, maybe the size of a shoebox, and appeared to be made of some kind of dark metal, tarnished with age. It looked old, with a simple latch on the front. Keanu brushed away more snow and carefully lifted it. The box was surprisingly heavy for its size. A particularly strong gust of wind reminded him of the dropping temperature. He tucked the box under his arm and hurried back to the car. The dog had managed to sit up slightly, though it still looked terribly weak. Its eyes followed Keanu as he placed the mysterious box on the back seat and then got behind the wheel. "Don't worry about that right now," Keanu told the dog as he put the car in drive. "Let's get you taken care of first." As they pulled back onto the road, Keanu glanced at his passenger. The dog had stopped shivering quite so violently, though it still looked frightened and confused. He reached over and gently stroked its head, careful not to startle it. "I'm Keanu, by the way," he said with a small smile. "I don't usually pick up hitchhikers, but I'll make an exception for you." The dog responded by slowly, cautiously leaning against the center console a little closer to Keanu. Something about the simple gesture of trust touched him deeply. Here was this animal that had every reason to fear humans. After all, someone had likely abandoned it out here in the freezing wilderness, yet it was willing to trust again, to accept help from a stranger. As Keanu drove through the snowy night, he kept glancing at the rearview mirror, where the mysterious box sat on his back seat. What could be inside? And what was its connection to the dog? The questions swirled in his mind like the snowflakes outside. The dog's breathing had become more regular, its eyes drooping with exhaustion now that it was finally warm. Keanu reached over to adjust the blanket, and the dog didn't flinch away. "What's your story, buddy?" Keanu wondered aloud. "How did you end up out there? And what's with that box?" Of course, the dog offered no answers, just watched him with those soulful eyes that seemed to hold so many secrets. In the comfortable warmth of the car, with gentle music playing softly from the radio, the dog's eyelids began to flutter closed. Keanu smiled to himself. He was no stranger to rescuing animals. He'd adopted several pets throughout his life from shelters. But finding this dog on a remote road in the dead of winter felt different somehow. Special, as if it wasn't just chance that had led him to spot that small movement in the snow. The nearest town appeared on the horizon, its lights twinkling against the dark sky. Keanu checked the GPS on his phone again, making sure he was headed in the right direction for the veterinary clinic. The dog had fallen asleep now, its chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. As for the mysterious box in the back seat, that would have to wait. First things first, get this dog the help it needed. Then and only then would Keanu unravel the mystery of what he'd found buried beneath the dog in the snow. Something told him that whatever was inside that box would change everything, not just for the dog but for him too. What had started as a routine drive back to his hotel after a long day of filming had turned into something unexpected. Keanu Reeves was no stranger to adventure in his movies, but real life had just thrown him a plot twist he never could have anticipated. And somehow, he knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. The veterinary clinic's bright lights cast long shadows across the snowy parking lot as Keanu pulled in. The dog had slept most of the way, occasionally whimpering in its dreams. Now, as the car stopped, it lifted its head weakly, those soulful eyes blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. "We're here, buddy," Keanu said softly. These people are going to help you. He grabbed his phone and the blanket-wrapped dog, leaving the mysterious box in the car for now. As he pushed through the clinic's front door, a blast of warm air greeted them. The small waiting room was empty except for a young woman behind the reception desk who looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. "Oh my, she began, then quickly gathered her professionalism. "How can we help you tonight?" "I found this dog on the side of the road," Keanu explained, cutting past any celebrity recognition. "About an hour north of here. It was half buried in snow. I think it's been out there a while." The receptionist was already on the phone. "Dr. Chen, we have an emergency. Hypothermia, possible starvation." She hung up and came around the desk. "Let's get him into exam room 2. The doctor will be right there." Keanu followed her down a short hallway, the smell of antiseptic filling his nostrils. The dog trembled against his chest, sensing the clinical environment. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now." The exam room was small but spotlessly clean. The receptionist, whose name tag read Lily, gestured to the metal table in the center. "You can put him there. Can I get some information from you while we wait for the doctor?" Keanu carefully placed the dog on the table, keeping the blanket wrapped around it. He answered Lily's questions as best he could, explaining exactly where and how he'd found the animal. "Do you have any idea how long it might have been out there?" she asked, typing notes into a computer. "No idea. There weren't any houses nearby, just woods and that road." The door opened and a middle-aged woman in scrubs entered. Dr. Chen was short with kind eyes and efficient movements. "Hello, I'm Dr. Chen," she said, giving Keanu a quick nod before turning her full attention to the dog. She didn't seem fazed by having a movie star in her exam room. "Let's see what we've got here." She gently unwrapped the blanket, speaking softly to the dog the whole time. The animal lay still, too exhausted to resist as she began her examination. "Male, probably around 3 years old," she commented. "Some kind of shepherd mix. Severely malnourished and dehydrated." Her skilled hands moved carefully over the dog's body. "Temperature is still too low but coming up. No frostbite, thankfully. The snow might have actually insulated him somewhat. I don't see any ID tags or collar marks." "Can you check for a microchip?" Keanu asked. Dr. Chen nodded, reaching for a handheld scanner. She ran it over the dog's shoulder blades and neck but shook her head. "No chip. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon, especially in rural areas." She continued her examination, occasionally murmuring reassurances to the dog. Finally, she straightened up. "He's in rough shape, but I think he'll pull through. We need to warm him up gradually, get some fluids in him, and start him on a careful feeding schedule. Starvation cases can't eat too much too quickly or it can cause serious problems." Keanu nodded, watching as the dog's eyes followed Dr. Chen around the room. There was intelligence in that gaze and something else, a depth that seemed to speak of experiences beyond what a normal dog might have lived. "He needs to stay here tonight, probably a few days," Dr. Chen continued. "Are you planning to adopt him, or should we contact animal services once he's stabilized?" The question caught Keanu off guard. With his filming schedule and constant travel, a dog wasn't practical. Yet something about this animal pulled at him. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "I'm in town filming for another 2 weeks. Can I have some time to think about it?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Of course. For now, let's focus on getting him healthy." She called for Lily, who returned with another staff member. Together, they prepared to move the dog to the treatment area in the back. As they lifted him carefully from the table, the dog twisted his head around, looking directly at Keanu with what seemed like concern. "It's okay," Keanu said. "I'm not leaving yet." Once the dog was settled in the treatment area with IV fluids and warming blankets, Keanu filled out paperwork and provided his contact information. He paused at the field labeled patient name. "Does he need a name?" he asked Lily. "It helps us keep track," she explained. "But you can change it later if you decide to adopt him." Keanu thought for a moment, remembering how he'd found the dog curled protectively over that mysterious box. "Guardian," he said finally. "Call him Guardian for now." After making arrangements to call in the morning for an update, Keanu headed back to his car. He was exhausted, the emotional toll of the rescue settling into his bones. But as he slid into the driver's seat, his eyes fell on the metal box in the back. Guardian had been protecting it somehow. Why? Back at his hotel, Keanu brought the box to his room. It was about the size of a small shoebox, made of tarnished metal with an old-fashioned latch. There was no lock, just a simple mechanism that had probably once closed tightly but was now slightly bent, as if someone had forced it open before. Keanu placed it on the coffee table and studied it for a long moment. The box looked old, decades old perhaps. The metal was scratched and dented in places with a patina that spoke of years of handling. What could be inside that was worth abandoning a dog to guard? With careful fingers, Keanu released the latch and slowly lifted the lid. The first thing he saw was a stack of yellowed photographs, their edges curled with age. He lifted them gently, aware of their fragility. The top photo showed a young man in military uniform standing proudly beside an older model Jeep. The picture was black and white, the man's face serious but with a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. Judging by the uniform and vehicle, it might have been from the Vietnam era. The next photo showed the same man, this time kneeling beside a dog, a German shepherd wearing a military vest. The resemblance to Guardian was striking, though this dog was clearly purebred and in peak condition. On the back of the photo, in faded blue ink, someone had written, "Me and Scout, first day of training, 1972. Keanu laid the photos aside carefully and looked deeper into the box. There was a set of dog tags, the military kind, not the pet kind, on a tarnished chain. He turned them over in his palm, reading the embossed information. Lawson, Robert J., 45789-3254, Opausa Catholic. Beneath the dog tags lay several folded letters, the paper thin and delicate with age. Keanu opened one with careful fingers. The handwriting was neat but distinctly masculine. Dearest Mom, training is going well. Scout and I passed our final tests yesterday. They say we're a natural team. I can't tell you exactly where we're headed next, but Scout will keep me safe, I promise. Don't worry too much. I'll write when I can. Your loving son, Bobby. Keanu folded the letter back along its well-worn creases and set it aside. His fingers found something else in the box, a small velvet pouch. Inside was a purple heart medal, its purple and gold surface, gleaming even in the dim hotel light. The final item in the box was the most puzzling, a faded map, hand-drawn on what looked like the back of an old restaurant placemat. It showed a section of countryside with a road, some trees, and an X marked at a spot labeled cabin. In the corner, someone had scribbled, Scout knows the way. Keanu spread the items across the table, trying to make sense of them. A Vietnam veteran named Robert Lawson, his military dog named Scout, a Purple Heart, and a map to what appeared to be a remote cabin. And somehow, decades later, a dog that looked remarkably like Scout was found guarding this box of memories in the snow, miles from anywhere. Keanu picked up the photo of the man and his dog again. The resemblance between Scout and Guardian was uncanny. The same intelligent eyes, the same proud bearing, despite Guardian's current poor condition. Could Guardian be Scout's descendant somehow? But how would he end up alone in the wilderness with this box? Keanu checked his watch. Past midnight. He should get some sleep. Tomorrow was supposed to be a full day of filming. But his mind was racing with questions. Who was Robert Lawson? Was he still alive? What happened to Scout? And most puzzling of all, how did Guardian and this box of memories end up abandoned in the snow? He carefully returned the items to the box, feeling as if he'd intruded on someone's private memories. Tomorrow he would call the vet to check on Guardian. And maybe, if time allowed, he could start looking into the mystery of Robert Lawson. As Keanu finally lay down to sleep, he couldn't shake the image of Guardian's eyes, so much like Scout's in that old photograph, looking back at him as the clinic staff carried him away. There was something unfinished there, a story waiting to be told, and somehow Keanu felt responsible for seeing it through. Morning came too quickly. Keanu woke to his alarm, and the memory of last night's events rushing back. Guardian. The box. The mystery of Robert Lawson. He reached for his phone and called the veterinary clinic before even getting out of bed. "Good morning, Pine Valley Veterinary Clinic," Lily's cheerful voice answered. "Hi, this is Keanu Reeves. I brought in a dog last night." "Guardian." "Yes, Dr. Chen just finished checking on him. He's doing much better this morning. His temperature is back to normal and he's taken some water and a little food." Relief washed over Keanu. "That's great news. Is it okay if I stop by to see him after my shoot today?" "Of course, we're open until 8. After hanging up, Keanu got ready for his day on set, but his mind kept drifting back to the contents of the metal box. Between takes, he found himself pulling out his phone to search for information about Vietnam War dog handlers. He learned that military working dogs, especially in Vietnam, had been crucial for detecting ambushes and hidden explosives. The bond between handlers and their dogs was legendary. Many handlers credited their dogs with saving their lives multiple times over. During his lunch break, Keanu tried searching for Robert J. Lawson, Vietnam, but nothing specific came up. There were too many veterans with similar names. He would need more information. The director called the day early due to a lighting equipment failure, a stroke of luck that gave Keanu extra time. On his way to the veterinary clinic, he stopped at a local veterans organization he'd spotted during last night's drive. The building was modest, with a flagpole out front and a sign that read, "Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 402. Inside, a few older men sat around tables, playing cards and sharing stories. They looked up as Keanu entered, a moment of surprised recognition, passing over their faces before their expressions settled into polite curiosity. An older man with white hair and a VFW cap approached. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," Keanu said. "I'm trying to find information about a Vietnam veteran named Robert Lawson. He was a dog handler." The man's eyebrows rose. "Bobby Lawson? With the German Shepherd? Now that's a name I haven't heard in years." Keanu's heart skipped. "You knew him?" "Not personally, but everyone around these parts knew his story." The man gestured to a chair. "I'm Pete, by the way. Have a seat." Keanu sat down, pulling out his phone. "Would it be okay if I record this? I'm trying to piece together what happened to him." Pete nodded, settling into his own chair with the ease of a man prepared to tell a long story. "Bobby Lawson grew up right here in Pine Valley, enlisted in '71 and got paired with a dog named Scout. They were sent to Vietnam as part of a detection team. Bobby and Scout were good, real good. They found more hidden explosives than any other team in their unit." Pete paused, his weathered fingers tapping the table. "Story goes, they were out on patrol when Scout alerted to an ambush. Bobby got the warning to his unit just in time, but he and Scout got separated from the others in the firefight. They were missing for almost 3 weeks before they found their way back to American lines, both of them wounded but alive." "He received a Purple Heart," Keanu said. Pete looked surprised. "That's right. How'd you know that?" Keanu hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I found a box of his belongings. There was a Purple Heart inside along with photos and letters." "Well, I'll be," Pete murmured. "Bobby came home in '73. He was different like most who served, but he had Scout. That dog never left his side. Bobby bought a cabin up in the mountains, lived pretty much as a hermit. Folks would see him in town occasionally, always with Scout beside him." "What happened to them?" Keanu asked. Pete's expression grew somber. "Scout died in the early '80s, hit Bobby hard. But the strange thing was, about a year later, Bobby showed up in town with a puppy that looked just like Scout, said a stray that looked like a German Shepherd mix had wandered to his cabin and had puppies. He kept one that reminded him of Scout, called him Scout Jr. "He bred the dogs?" Keanu asked, thinking of Guardian. "In a way. Over the years, Bobby always had a dog that looked like Scout. Town gossip was that he was breeding them to keep Scout's line going. The dogs were smart too. Bobby trained them just like military dogs. Last I heard of Bobby was maybe 5 years ago. He'd be in his 70s now if he's still with us." Keanu pulled out his phone and showed Pete the photo of Bobby and Scout. Pete's Eyes widened. That's them, all right. Where'd you find this? Keanu explained about finding Guardian and the box. Pete listened intently, nodding occasionally. The cabin on your map is probably Bobby's place. It's about 20 miles north of where you found the dog up in the hills. Remote spot. No phone, limited electricity. Bobby liked it that way. You think he's still there? Keanu asked. Pete shrugged. Hard to say. Nobody's mentioned seeing him in town for a few years now. But that doesn't mean much. He always was a loner. After thanking Pete and getting rough directions to where the cabin might be, Keanu headed to the veterinary clinic. Walking into the treatment area, he was amazed at the difference in Guardian. The dog was still thin, but his eyes were brighter, and he was sitting up in his kennel rather than lying down. When Guardian saw Keanu, his tail thumped against the floor of the kennel. The simple gesture of recognition touched Keanu deeply. Hey, buddy, he said softly, kneeling by the kennel door. You're looking better. Dr. Chen appeared beside him. He's responding well to treatment. His blood work shows no major issues beyond the malnutrition and dehydration. He's a strong dog with a good constitution. Any idea how long he was out there? Keanu asked. Based on his condition, I'd guess at least a week, maybe 2. It's remarkable he survived, especially in this weather. Keanu told Dr. Chen what he'd learned about Robert Lawson and his dogs. That would explain a lot, she said. Guardian has clearly been trained. Watch this. She gave a hand signal and Guardian immediately lay down. Another signal and he sat back up. Most pet dogs don't respond to signals that precisely. And did you notice his eyes? How he's constantly scanning, observing everything? That's typical of working dogs. She opened the kennel and Guardian stepped out carefully, staying close to her side. He can have a short walk around the clinic, but he needs to take it easy for now. Keanu held out his hand and Guardian sniffed it before pressing his head against Keanu's palm, a gesture of trust that made Keanu smile. I think I need to find Robert Lawson, Keanu said. If he's still alive, he must be missing Guardian. And if not, well, I need to find out what happened. Dr. Chen nodded. Guardian should be well enough to leave in a couple of days. Will you be taking him then? The question gave Keanu pause. His schedule was tight, and his lifestyle wasn't ideal for a dog. But looking into Guardian's intelligent eyes, he felt a responsibility he couldn't explain. Yes, he said, at least until we solve this mystery. Back at his hotel, Keanu spread the contents of the metal box across the table again. The map caught his attention, crude, but with enough landmarks that, combined with Pete's directions, might lead to Bobby's cabin. Picking up the photo of Bobby and Scout, he studied their faces. There was a story here that needed to be told, a mystery that needed solving. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant, reminding him about tomorrow's early call time. The film schedule was packed for the next few days. Finding Bobby's cabin would have to wait until his next day off, Sunday 4 days away. Keanu carefully repacked the box, his mind made up. Sunday he would take Guardian in the box and try to find the cabin. Together they would uncover what happened to Robert Lawson and how Guardian ended up alone in the snow with a box of precious memories. He picked up one of the letters again, reading Bobby's words to his mother. Scout will keep me safe, I promise. All these years later, it seemed Scout's descendants were still standing guard, still keeping watch over the memories of a man who might or might not still be alive. The Yite parallel wasn't lost on Keanu. How many times had he played characters who were Guardian's protectors? And now, here he was, drawn into a real-life mystery about a dog named Guardian who had been protecting something precious against all odds. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. But first, he had a film to finish and a dog to help nurse back to health. And somewhere in the mountains, a cabin waited with answers to questions he was only beginning to form. The next 4 days felt like the longest of Keanu's life. Between takes on set, he would call the veterinary clinic for updates on Guardian. The dog was gaining strength daily, eating well, and according to Dr. Chen, showing more of his personality, alert, intelligent, and surprisingly gentle for a dog who had clearly been through trauma. Keanu also made time to visit Guardian each evening, He would sit on the floor of the clinic's recovery room, talking softly to the dog as Guardian rested his head on Keanu's knee. Sometimes Keanu would read aloud from Bobby's letters, and Guardian would watch him with those knowing eyes as if he understood every word. "Do you think he can tell these are Bobby's words?" Keanu asked Dr. Chen during one visit. She smiled thoughtfully. "Dogs have extraordinary senses. He might recognize sense on the paper, or maybe just the emotion in your voice when you read them. Either way, he clearly connects with those letters somehow." Finally, Sunday arrived. Keanu had arranged to rent a sturdy SUV with four-wheel drive, stocking it with supplies: bottled water, snacks, first aid kit, blankets, and a bag of premium dog food Dr. Chen had recommended for Guardian's recovery diet. He also brought warm clothes, boots, and a good flashlight. The mountains in February could be unpredictable, and the last thing he wanted was to be caught unprepared. When Keanu arrived at the clinic to pick up Guardian, he found the dog waiting eagerly, sitting alertly beside Dr. Chen at the front desk. Guardian's coat, now clean and brushed, gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He was still thin, but his eyes were bright and clear. "He's all set," Dr. Chen said, handing Keanu a small bag of medications. "These are his antibiotics, one twice a day with food, and some supplements to help him regain his strength. He should eat small meals 4 times a day for now. Thank you for everything," Keanu said, settling the bill and adding a generous donation to the clinic's rescue fund. Dr. Chen knelt to say goodbye to Guardian, gently scratching behind his ears. "You be good and stick close to your new friend," she told the dog. Then to Keanu, "Be careful up in those mountains. Cell service is spotty at best." Outside, Guardian hesitated before jumping into the SUV, sniffing the vehicle thoroughly first. Once inside, he settled onto the blanket Keanu had spread across the passenger seat, watching the world through the window with intense interest. "Ready to go home, buddy?" Keanu asked, realizing as he said it that home might mean something very different to Guardian than a movie star's temporary hotel room. With the metal box secure in the back seat and the hand-drawn map on his phone, Keanu headed north out of town. Guardian sat up straighter as they left the city limits, his nose twitching with the changing scents coming through the cracked window, following Pete's directions and comparing them to the crude map from Bobby's box. Keanu turned onto increasingly narrow and remote roads. The landscape grew wilder, the snow deeper. Pine trees huddled close to the road, their branches heavy with white. About an hour into the journey, Guardian suddenly stood up on the seat, ears forward, body tense with attention. "What is it, boy?" Keanu asked, slowing the SUV. Guardian whined, softly, pacing on the seat and looking out the windows with increased interest. They were passing through a stretch of forest with a small stream running parallel to the road. Nothing looked particularly special to Keanu, but Guardian was clearly recognizing something. "Do you know where we are?" Keanu wondered aloud. As they continued driving, Guardian's excitement grew. He moved back and forth from window to window, his tail wagging slightly. When Keanu turned onto an unmarked dirt road that was little more than a trail through the trees, Guardian barked once, the first time Keanu had heard him make that sound. The SUV crawled up the narrow path, its tires crunching through snow that likely hadn't seen traffic in weeks. After about a mile, the trees opened up to reveal a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin. It was a modest structure built of dark logs with a steep roof to shed snow. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, a thin gray line against the white and blue backdrop of sky and mountain. Someone was home. Guardian whined again, pawing at the window. His entire body quivered with anticipation. "Looks like we found it," Keanu said, feeling a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. What would they discover here? An elderly veteran who had lost his dog, or something else entirely? He parked the SUV and turned to Guardian. "Let's go slowly, okay? We don't know what we're walking into." When Keanu opened the passenger door, Guardian jumped out immediately, but instead of running toward the cabin, he stayed close to Keanu's side, pressing against his leg as they approached. Despite the dog's obvious recognition of the place, there was a hesitancy in his movements that Keanu found troubling. The cabin's front porch was swept clear of snow, and a stack of firewood stood neatly by the door. These were signs of occupancy, of care. Keanu knocked firmly on the wooden door, Guardian sitting alertly beside him. No answer came. He knocked again, louder. "Hello? Mr. Lawson? Bobby?" he called. Guardian whined, circling anxiously now. He moved to a window and stood on his hind legs, peering inside, then back to Keanu with an almost human expression of concern. Worry began to gnaw at Keanu. Something wasn't right. He tried the door handle, and to his surprise it turned easily. The door swung open with a creak of hinges. "Hello?" Keanu called again, stepping cautiously into the dim interior. "Anyone home?" The cabin was a single large room, with a loft space above. A fire burned low in the stone fireplace, casting flickering light across rustic furniture. A wooden table with 2 chairs. A sagging couch covered with a handmade quilt. Bookshelves overflowing with paperbacks and old magazines. The place was tidy but lived in, with the comfortable clutter of someone who had occupied the same space for many years. Guardian slipped past Keanu and trotted directly to a recliner positioned near the fireplace. An elderly man sat there, eyes closed, a book open on his lap. He wasn't moving. Keanu's heart sank. He approached carefully, noting the man's weathered face, his white hair and beard, the plaid flannel shirt and wool cardigan. This had to be Bobby Lawson, looking very much like an older version of the young soldier in the photographs. "Mr. Lawson?" Keanu said softly. To his immense relief, the old man's eyes fluttered open. He blinked in confusion, taking in Keanu's presence with a frown that quickly turned to shock when Guardian pressed his nose against the man's hand. "Scout," he whispered, his voice cracking. Then with more clarity, "No, not Scout. Rex, how did you—" His eyes found Keanu again, brow furrowed in confusion. "Who are you? How did you find my cabin?" Keanu knelt down to be at eye level with the seated man. "My name is Keanu Reeves. I found your dog about a week ago, half buried in snow by the roadside about 20 miles from here. He was guarding a metal box." Bobby's eyes widened. "The memory box," he breathed. He looked down at the dog, who was now resting his head on Bobby's knee, tail sweeping slowly across the wooden floor. "Rex, you found him. The vet's been calling him Guardian," Keanu explained. "We didn't know his real name." Bobby smiled faintly, his gnarled hand stroking Rex's head. "Guardian? That fits too. He's been guarding my memories just like I trained him to." He looked up at Keanu, his eyes suddenly sharp. "You have the box?" "In my car. I can get it for you." When Keanu returned with the box, Bobby was sitting straighter in his chair, more alert. Rex, or Guardian, as Keanu still thought of him, hadn't moved from the old man's side. "I had a fall," Bobby explained as Keanu placed the box on the small table beside the recliner. "About 2 weeks back. Slipped on ice while collecting firewood. Hurt my hip pretty bad. Rex tried to help me back to the cabin, but I couldn't make it. Told him to go get the memory box and find help." "You trained him to do that?" Keanu asked, amazed. Bobby nodded, a glint of pride in his roomy eyes. "Trained all my dogs the same, way Scout was trained in Nam. To find things, protect things, to get help when needed." He patted Rex's head. "But I never thought he'd have to go so far. Or that he'd be found by someone like you." "How did you manage after the fall?" Keanu asked, noticing now the makeshift walking stick leaning against the wall and the careful way Bobby held himself. "Crawled back eventually. Took hours. Been mostly stuck in this chair since. Running low on firewood I can reach. Not sure what I would have done in another day or two." He looked at Rex with undisguised affection. "Good boy. You did just what you were supposed to." Rex's tail thumped harder against the floor. Bobby opened the metal box, his fingers trembling slightly as he touched the photographs inside. "Scout's great-great-grandson," he said, nodding toward Rex. "5th generation. Just as smart as his ancestor, maybe smarter." As Bobby spoke, Keanu noticed how frail the old man looked. The cabin was cold except near the fireplace, and the wood stack inside was down to just a few logs. The kitchen area looked unused, a thin layer of dust on the counters. How long had Bobby been struggling alone up here? "Mr. Lawson," Keanu said, carefully. "You need medical attention for that hip. And you're running low on supplies. Would you let me help you?" Bobby's face hardened. "I've managed on my own for 50 years. Don't need help now." "Rex came looking for help," Keanu pointed, out gently. "He knew you needed it, that's why he brought me here." The old man looked down at his dog, something unspoken passing between them. Finally, Bobby sighed. "Suppose you're right. Rex always did have good judgment about people." He fixed Keanu with a penetrating stare. "You really found him in the snow, and instead of just taking him to a shelter, you went looking for his home?" Keanu nodded. "There was something special about him, and when I found the box, I knew there was a story that needed to be finished." Bobby's weathered face softened. "Not many would have done that." He stroked Rex's fur thoughtfully. "Maybe it is time for a change. Getting harder to manage here alone, each winter." As they talked, Keanu built up the fire and made tea from supplies in Bobby's kitchen. The old veteran gradually shared more of his story. His time in Vietnam with Scout, his difficulty readjusting to civilian life, his decision to live remotely with only his dogs for company. By the time darkness fell outside, a plan had formed. Keanu would help Bobby get medical care for his hip and assistance with home health visits. Bobby would consider moving to a veterans facility in town for the harshest winter months, returning to his beloved cabin in the warmer seasons. And Rex? His future remained a question mark hanging in the air between the old soldier and the actor, who had followed a half-frozen dog into an unexpected adventure. 6 months later, Keanu stood on the porch of Bobby Lawson's cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Beside him, Rex, he'd finally gotten used to calling him that instead of guardian, sat alertly, his coat now glossy and full, his body strong and healthy. At Rex's feet lay the old metal memory box, polished now but still bearing the dents and scratches of its journey. "Beautiful evening," Bobby said, emerging from the cabin with the aid of a cane. His hip had healed well, though the doctor said he would always walk with a slight limp. At 74, Bobby counted himself lucky to be walking at all. "Sure is," Keanu agreed, helping the older man settle into one of the new Adirondack chairs that now graced the porch, part of the cabin renovations Keanu had quietly funded. Months since their first meeting had brought many changes. After getting Bobby proper medical care, Keanu had extended his stay in Canada, using his breaks from filming to help the veteran. What had started as a simple rescue had evolved into an unexpected friendship between the aging soldier and the Hollywood actor. Bobby had initially resisted the help, proud and independent as he was. But when Keanu framed it as repaying a debt, after all, Rex had saved Keanu from the emptiness he'd been feeling lately, Bobby had reluctantly agreed. The story Keanu told him was true. Before finding Rex, he'd been going through the motions, feeling disconnected from his work and himself. The mystery of the dog and the box had awakened something in him that had been dormant for too long. "Film all wrapped up now?" Bobby asked, scratching behind Rex's ears as the dog moved between them. Keanu nodded. "Final day of shooting was yesterday. Post-production starts next month, so you'll be heading back to Los Angeles soon." It wasn't a question. Bobby had always known this day would come. "Tomorrow morning," Keanu confirmed, a weight in his chest, as he said it. Early flight. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light change over the mountains. The cabin looked different now. A new roof, repaired steps, fresh chinking between the logs. Inside were new appliances, including a satellite phone for emergencies. The dirt road leading to the property had been improved too, making it accessible year-round. Most importantly, Bobby was no longer alone. After his story had become known in town, an injured Vietnam veteran rescued by his loyal dog and a famous actor, the community had rallied around him. Veterans from the VFW visited regularly, A local teenager came by twice a week to stock firewood and help with chores. The grocery store in town now delivered his monthly supplies. Never thought I'd let so many people into my life again, Bobby mused, as if reading Keanu's thoughts. Spent 50 years keeping the world at arm's length. Now I can't seem to get a moment's peace. But the complaint held no real sting, and the smile lines around his eyes had deepened over the past months. Rex moved to sit between them, his head swiveling from one to the other as they spoke, as if following the conversation. "What about you?" Bobby asked suddenly. "What happens to you tomorrow?" Keanu looked down at his hands. This was the conversation he'd been avoiding. "I go back to my life. More films, more travel." And Rex? The question hung in the air between them. In the month since the rescue, no clear decision had been made about the dog's future. Rex had stayed with Bobby while the cabin was being renovated and the old man was healing. During that time, Keanu had visited frequently, taking Rex for long walks in the mountains, sometimes bringing him back to his hotel for a night or two. The bond between them had grown strong. Yet Rex clearly belonged here too. He knew every trail around the cabin, every squirrel's hiding place, every change in the mountain weather before it happened. And his connection to Bobby, to the lineage of Scout, was undeniable. "I've been thinking about that," Keanu said slowly. "He belongs here with you. This is his home." Bobby studied him for a long moment. "That's not what I asked. I asked what happens to you." Keanu met the older man's gaze, surprised by the question. "I'll be fine, I always am." Bobby snorted. "Sure you will, just like I was fine up here alone for 50 years. He leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "Let me tell you something I learned in Vietnam. There's a difference between surviving and living. With Scout, I was living. After he died, I was just surviving. Even with his descendants keeping me company," he looked at Rex meaningfully. "Until this one brought you here." "What are you saying?" Keanu asked. "I'm saying Rex did his job. He found exactly the help I needed. Not just someone to call an ambulance, but someone who needed saving just as much as I did." Bobby reached for the memory box at Rex's feet. "We've been keepers of memories, Rex and me, but maybe it's time to make some new ones." He opened the box and pulled out a faded photograph of a young soldier with his military dog. "Scout saved my life more times than I can count. His descendants kept me going when I thought I had nothing left." He handed the photo to Keanu. "I want you to have this." "Bobby, I couldn't." "Take it," the old man insisted. "And take Rex too." Keanu stared at him in shock. "What?" "That dog has the heart of a guardian and the soul of an explorer. He's been up on this mountain his whole life. Maybe it's time he saw more of the world." Bobby smiled sadly. "Besides, I'm not as spry as I used to be. These days, Rex spends half his time looking after me instead of running free like he should." "But he's your family," Keanu protested. "The last link to Scout. And I'm his family. That won't change." Bobby tapped his chest. "Bonds that matter don't break with distance. I learned that in the war." He looked out at the mountains he'd called home for half a century. "I've got people checking on me now. Got that fancy satellite phone you insisted on. Rex has done his duty here. Time for him to start a new chapter." Rex, as if understanding every word, moved to sit at Keanu's feet, looking up at him with those intelligent eyes. "He's chosen," Bobby said simply. "Just like Scout chose me all those years ago." That night, as Bobby slept in his bedroom, Keanu sat by the fire with Rex curled beside him. The decision had been made, though not without tears on both men's parts. In the morning, Rex would leave with Keanu, beginning a new life far from the only home he'd ever known. Keanu had already made the arrangements: pet passports, veterinary certificates, a comfortable travel crate for the flights. His home in Los Angeles had a large fenced yard where Rex could run. His schedule would need adjusting, but film sets were often dog-friendly, and for longer shoots, Rex could return to visit Bobby. "It's a big change," Keanu told the dog, stroking his soft fur. "For both of us." Rex sighed contentedly, pressing closer against Keanu's leg. Morning came too quickly. Bobby stood on the porch as Keanu loaded the last of Rex's things into the SUV. A worn blanket, a favorite toy, a bag of special treats. The memory box was tucked safely in Keanu's duffel, carrying not just Bobby's past now, but the story of how their lives had intersected. "You'll bring him back to visit," Bobby said, scratching behind Rex's ears one more time. "It wasn't a question. As often as we can make it," Keanu promised. "And I've set up a video call system on your new tablet. You can see him anytime." Bobby nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. He knelt with some difficulty to look Rex in the eye. "You be a good boy. Look after him like you looked after me." Rex licked the old man's face, his tail wagging slowly. The drive down the mountain was quiet, Rex watching out the window as his homeland fell away behind them. At one point he whined softly, and Keanu reached over to reassure him with a gentle hand. "It's okay, buddy. We'll come back. I promise." By the time they reached the airport, Rex had settled, his natural adaptability taking over. As they boarded the private plane Keanu had chartered for the trip, he wasn't about to put Rex in cargo. The dog walked confidently up the steps, pausing only once to look back at the mountains in the distance. 6 months ago, Keanu had been driving alone through a snowy night, feeling empty despite his success. Now he walked onto a plane with a dog by his side and a metal box full of memories, not just Bobby's, but his own new ones as well. As the plane took off, Rex settled at Keanu's feet, his mission complete. He had saved Bobby by finding Keanu, and perhaps in his own way he had saved Keanu too. Back in his mountain cabin, Bobby Lawson sat on his porch, watching the same sky that would soon carry his friend and his dog toward their new life together. He held an old dog tag in his palm. Scout's from all those years ago, the only piece of the memory box he had kept. "They'll be okay, Scout," he said to the mountain air. They found each other, just like we did, and somewhere over the Rocky Mountains a plane flew west, carrying with it a unique passenger, a dog with the heart of a military hero and the soul of a guardian, embarking on his greatest adventure yet.